Purchase me before sunrise, yet I possess skills in preparation. I shall become whatever role you require, pleaded the Apache maiden. Territory of New Mexico. April 1875. A towering wall of crimson earth stretched above the extraction settlement. Gusts screamed across the fabric shelters, clattering metal vessels and pulling at cordage with fierce biting claws. The terrain remained solid with crystallized mire, the atmosphere harsh. Flames danced weakly in corroded drums, while the aroma of charcoal, vapor, and perspiration lingered like a second atmosphere. The Copper Valley. Excavation settlement wasn't a destination souls reached through preference. Here, shattered individuals tunneled through stone seeking copper deposits and remained sufficient time to lose their identities. Here too, Morning Star, 20 summers old, offspring of breeze and untamed grasslands, had arrived beneath darkness's veil. No chains bound her, none proved necessary. The expression in her guardian's gaze conveyed everything. She existed not. As labor, she was merchandised, temporary, expendable. No females dwelt in the settlement officially. Those appearing received labels as culinary assistants, yet all understood the underlying meaning. The shelter she was thrust into stood vacant, containing merely a sleeping platform, a vessel of cloudy liquid, and a worn covering. She refused to sit. Sleep eluded her. She remained upright, observing the fabric barriers as frigidity consumed. Her frame, eventually hushed dialogue occurred nearby. It's designated for sunrise. Supervisor claims initial selection. Morning Star's blood chilled. She moved silently toward the entrance opening, peering outward. A guard gripped a writing board. Upon it, rough listings of identities. Hers appeared among them. Morning Star, kitchen staff, personal selection. Her breathing ceased. Dawn approached rapidly. She waited until embers diminished, and the settlement descended into intoxicated stillness. Then she crept barefoot across frozen soil, weaving between vehicles and shadows. She knew her destination. The settlement's distant edge housed the surveyor's shelter. Expanded, reinforced with timber planks and surrounded by stacked containers of measuring instruments. The occupant was reportedly significant, and crucially, not vicious. Samuel Harrison, 36 winters, bereaved. Whispers labeled him peculiar, an individual who communicated with none. Consumed minimally, who continued wearing his matrimonial band beneath his coverings. She crouched outside the dwelling extensively, contemplating. Then she parted the entrance. Within, warmth enveloped her. Subdued illumination spilled across architectural drawings and implements. Samuel occupied a table, his back toward her, inscribing upon an extended parchment with tranquil accuracy. He wore charcoal woolen attire, sleeves rolled upward, fabric marked with lubricant and carbon. Morning Star stepped inward, her voice small yet distinct. "Sir," he rotated partially, startled. His expression creased. She collapsed to her knees. "They intend selling me at sunrise," she murmured, her voice fracturing. "Yet I possess culinary abilities so refined, shall fulfill any necessity you require." Samuel rose gradually, examined her not with desire, not with fury, but bewilderment. He regarded her as though uncertain of her reality. She continued, "Desperate, you need not touch me. I shall remain unobtrusive. I simply cannot go to them. Please." Silence expanded. Then Samuel approached. He knelt before her. "What designation do you carry?" he inquired softly. "Morning Star?" His gaze remained fixed on hers. "I am not among them," he stated. "I understand." Stood again, approached his workspace. He opened a compartment and retrieved documentation, labor assignment forms for settlement duties. Completed one, slowly, carefully. Name Morning Star. Assignment, Personal Settlement Aid, Surveying Department. Signature, S. Harrison. Then he claimed the settlement authorization from his belt, a substantial bronze stamp, and impressed it into the document's lower section. He returned to her and extended it. "Remain here tonight," he said. "None shall harm you." Morning Star accepted the document with trembling fingers. "Gratitude," she whispered. Samuel didn't respond. He returned to his table, seated himself, and resumed writing. Yet something in his posture shifted, a tension released, a barrier lowered. And for the first time in extensive duration, he wrote more slowly, as though something had altered the significance of the ink. The following morning, the settlement, stirred with customary commotion boots, crushing gravel, metal clanging. Individuals shouting commands with routine sharpness. Yet in the distant corner, near the surveyor's shelter, transformation had occurred. Samuel Harrison stood before the administrative structure, the requisition document in his grip. Supervisor, a weathered individual with a permanent scowl, examined it through narrowed vision. Personal aid? Since when does a surveyor require one? Samuel shrugged. Since the geological reports lag for weeks behind, and my workspace resembles an excavation disaster. I require assistance, cataloging equipment, and maintaining organization, unless you prefer handling it yourself. The supervisor grunted. You guarantee her? I do. A lengthy pause. Then the stamp struck the document with finality. That afternoon, Morning Star relocated to the shelter's side section, Samuel partitioned with a woolen divider. None spoke aloud, yet gazes followed her across the settlement. Curiosity, scorn, envy, an Apache maiden assigned to the white surveyor's private quarters. Whispers proved inevitable. Inside the shelter, the space was functional, yet deteriorated. Drafting surfaces, containers of brass wire, damaged lanterns, and dust layers coated everything like residue after flames. A single cot sat unmade in the corner. Empty spirits bottle lay beside it. Morning Star didn't request permission. She simply rolled her sleeves upward and began. She swept initially, then opened the shelter flaps to admit atmosphere. She folded. His clothing, refilled his water container, scrubbed soot from the metal heating device. By evening, her hands were cracked and blackened, yet the shelter appeared human again, inhabited breathing. When Samuel returned, he stood silently in the entrance for an extended moment. The bottle had vanished, the floor swept, his cot arranged. He walked past her wordlessly and seated himself. Morning Star remained quiet as well. She moved to the small iron vessel she had positioned over the heating device earlier and spooned out a stew. Modest yet aromatic, prepared from preserved meat and wild roots she had traded from another worker, she placed the bowl on the table without glancing at him. Samuel consumed one portion, then another. He ate slowly, methodically, until the bowl was clean. Only then did Morning Star turn toward the corner shelf there, tucked beneath a dusty cloth. She had discovered a small metal container while cleaning. She lifted it gently as though it still contained breath. She opened it and revealed the contents. An aged photograph faded by time and heat. A young woman in summer attire printed with small wildflowers. Her smile was gentle, her hand resting. On the arm of a younger Samuel, Morning Star met his eyes, then closed the container and returned it to the shelf. I didn't intend intrusion, she said quietly. Samuel didn't speak for an extensive period. Then he nodded once. She prepared that stew years ago. I assumed, Morning Star replied. The silence between them changed. It was no longer a barrier, but a space they both occupied, a space neither understood how to leave, nor wished to yet. That night, Samuel set aside his papers early. He didn't drink. He dimmed the lamp lower than usual, the glow softer against the canvas walls. And when Morning Star lay down behind the curtain, she stared upward at the ceiling for an extensive time. Hearing the stillness in the man on the other side, he hadn't thanked her. Yet he had consumed every portion. Days merged into each other. With routines, rhythm, Morning Star didn't speak unless addressed. She rose early, stoked the heating device, prepared coffee, and organized the surveyor's maps when wind scattered them across the table. She scrubbed iron pans until her knuckles cracked and mended a tear in Samuel's shirt without being requested. Her movements were efficient, quiet, the kind that learned long ago how to disappear into usefulness. She occupied no more space than necessary, left no trace behind. Samuel, for his part, said little. He offered no thanks, no questions, only silence an occasional acknowledgement. Yet something shifted. He consumed less spirits. He lit the lamp. Earlier, and sometimes after supper, he would sit outside the shelter and simply listen to the wind, to the stillness, to the small sounds of someone else sharing his world. The silence between them became less like distance, more like the hush of something beginning to thaw. One morning, while sorting through old fabric in a supply container, Morningstar found a strip of canvas too torn to repair. The edges were frayed, the center stained. Instead of discarding it, she took a piece of charcoal from the heating device bin and began to draw. Her fingers were stiff from cold, yet she moved with purpose, not precision. It wasn't exact. The lines were uneven, yet in the center a rough wildflower bloomed, circular, radiant. A burst of stubborn gold against faded gray. That evening, when Samuel returned from shaft inspection, he saw the fabric attached to the canvas. Wall beside his bed, he paused. His eyes lingered on the flower longer than he realized. He said nothing, didn't remove it. The next day passed without mention of it. Yet that night, while Morningstar stirred stew over the fire, Samuel spoke. For the first time in days, "Why a wildflower?" She looked at him, surprised. Then she shrugged slightly. "They seek the sun, even when the sky is full of smoke." Samuel sat down across from her, watching the flames. "My wife's family cultivated them," he said, "in Kansas, fields of them. She wore them in her hair." Morningstar said nothing. She merely passed him his bowl. After a long pause, he added, "She died 4 years ago. There was an attack. The patrol said it was Apache, yet I never saw who fired the initial shot. The cabin burned. I found her in the ash." "I am sorry," Morningstar whispered. Samuel looked at the bowl in his hands, then away. "Since then I have not constructed anything that didn't break. I thought maybe if I buried myself in the earth long enough, I would forget what the sun looked like." Morningstar stirred the pot again slowly. "My mother was sold," she said softly, "by a man who said he would wed her. He traded her to a passing caravan. I was 6. She told me to hide under a pile of hides. I never saw her again. She didn't cry when she said it. She stared into the fire like it was the only thing that had ever remained. I have been to many places," she continued, "yet never a home." For a moment neither spoke. The wind moved outside, brushing the shelter flaps. The wildflower on the wall trembled like it too was listening. Samuel finished his stew in silence. When he was done, he placed the bowl aside and stood. He paused by the curtain that separated their sleeping spaces. "The canvas is yours," he said. "You don't need to ask permission to display what you draw." Then he stepped behind the curtain and disappeared into the darkness. That night, Morningstar lay on her cot and stared at her drawing. The flower was crude, its petals jagged, its stem crooked, yet it was there, still standing, still facing what little light there was, and for the first time, felt like something she had planted had taken root. The mesh shelter reeked of grease and sweat, thick with the noise of boots, scraping wooden floors and tin cups clanging on benches. Most of the miners had been drinking since sundown, celebrating a new copper vein discovered near Shaft 4. The laughter was loud, laced with something meaner than joy. Morningstar kept her head down as she scrubbed a cast-iron pot in the corner. Her fingers burned from the heat. The back of her neck prickled. She felt him before she heard him. A miner, broad-shouldered, sweat-stained, eyes red with liquor, leaned into her space, breath sour and hot. "Well, now look at this. Etch. Flower they gave to the surveyor. Must be nice, sleeping your way into a shelter like that." Morningstar didn't respond. He grabbed her wrist. "I asked you a question. I'm not yours," she said evenly, trying to pull away. The room quieted as others turned to watch. Some laughed. A few looked uneasy. None moved. The man twisted her arm. Harder, Morningstar winced. "You think you're better than us, hiding behind that pretty boy Harrison?" Then, before she could react, he shoved her back against the table. Pots crashed. The basin spilled. Morningstar gasped as the miner pressed closer, snarling. That was when the iron pickaxe hit him. Samuel had come through the side entrance, silent. As snowfall, the blow landed clean across the man's back. Not enough to kill, yet enough to send him crashing to the floor with a howl. He tried to rise. Samuel brought the pickaxe down again, once hard across the elbow. There was a sickening crack. The miner screamed. Chaos erupted. Some men shouted. One ran to fetch the supervisor. Samuel stood over the crumpled body, chest heaving. His eyes were dark, unblinking. The pickaxe hung loosely in his hands, its edge smeared with blood. Morning Star stood frozen, hair clinging to her damp face, breath shallow. Later, inside the administrative structure, the mine sheriff and 2 company men circled Samuel like wolves. He stood still, arms folded, eyes straight ahead. He was drunk, Samuel said. He grabbed her, I responded. You broke his damn arm, the sheriff snapped. Heal. Still be able to dig, Samuel replied. Eventually. Don't get clever with me, Harrison. You think this is a city? You're not some union officer anymore. You can't just lay a man out because you feel like playing hero. Samuel remained silent. One of the supervisors leaned forward. You're valuable, Harrison, yet no one is irreplaceable, especially not over some camp girl. Samuel met his gaze without flinching, then dismissed me. A long silence.
Ow.
Then the sheriff cursed under his breath. To hell with it. You're on warning. One more incident like this, you're gone. No severance, no escort. Samuel nodded once and walked out. Back at the shelter, Morning Star sat on the cot, her hand still shaking. Her lip was split. A bruise darkened her jaw. When Samuel stepped inside, she stood quickly. You shouldn't have done that, she said, her voice small. They will hate you now. They already did, Samuel answered. He removed his gloves, placed them neatly on the table, and knelt near the heating device to stoke the fire. Morning Star turned away, yet her eyes stung. No one ever did that before, she whispered. No one ever chose me, not like that. Samuel didn't speak. He only nodded. Later that night, after she had fallen asleep, Samuel returned to the cloth Morning Star had drawn on the wildflower she had pinned beside his bed. During the scuffle in the mess shelter, it had been ripped from the canvas wall, stepped on, torn along the middle seam. He picked it up gently, brushing away the dirt with careful fingers. He sat at the table by lamplight and began to mend it thread by thread. It took him over an hour. When he was done, he rose quietly, crossed the shelter, and rehung the cloth exactly where it had been. The wildflower faced the same direction. As before, a little crooked, a little worn, yet still standing. The wind rolled down from the ridge that morning, heavy with dust and the bitter sting of frost. Inside the shelter, the cot was empty. Samuel noticed first the absence of the wildflower cloth and the folded blanket on the corner of her bed, then the silence. Silence too hollow, too final. He stepped outside, scanning the trail that led toward the old supply yard. Faint footprints marked the dirt, light enough to be hers. He followed. It didn't take long to find her. Morning Star was walking fast, hunched against the wind. A small satchel slung across her shoulder, her braid, whipped behind her like a tail caught in flight. Morning Star, Samuel called. She stopped yet didn't turn around. He caught up in a few strides, breath already tight with anger. Where the hell are you going? She didn't answer right away. Then she said softly, Back. Back to what? To where I came from. That place was a cage. She faced him now, her eyes clear despite the wind. It was a debt. I let you carry it when it was mine. Samuel stared at her. What are you talking about? I was sent here to be traded, used, passed around, like a coin. You put your name on paper and stood between me and that fate. Yet I shouldn't have let you. I should have left that first night. Samuel's jaw clenched, his voice dropping low and sharp. So that's it. You pack up and vanish because you think you owe me something. I do owe you, she snapped. And I cannot pay it. Not with cleaning, not with stew, not even with loyalty. Samuel stepped closer. You think I gave a damn about stew? She looked away. He gritted his teeth. You think this was about pity? It's about saving someone because I had no one left? Shouldn't. Have to. He stopped, thinking. You're thinking. You're one of them. Morning Star froze. Samuel's voice broke as he said, "You are not a debt. You are not a burden. You are the only thing in that shelter that hasn't turned to ash." She turned her face, and he saw the tears rise. "You made the place feel alive again," he continued. "I come home and there is warmth, a bed that smells like wild sage, a drawing of a flower on the wall that doesn't know how to give up. I didn't think I was worth staying for," she whispered. He stepped forward slowly until only inches separated them. "You were the first person," he said gently, "who ever made me believe the light might come back." Morning Star's breath caught. He raised a hand not to touch her, yet to show her something. The torn cloth, the wild flower, now mended, the seam tight and visible, yet the shape still intact. "I fixed this," he said, "because I couldn't stand the sight of it broken." Hush. Her eyes shimmered wide and wet. "Let me fix this, too," he said softly. "Not because you owe me, yet because I don't want you gone." She closed her eyes for a long moment. The wind blew around them, tugging at her sleeves, pulling her back toward a world that had never held her. Then she let the bag fall from her shoulder. Samuel stepped forward and caught her as she folded into his arms. He held her like she was real, like she wasn't about to disappear. It's like she wasn't some temporary kindness in a brutal place. She held him back, not out of gratitude, not because she felt safe, yet because for the first time she believed she was allowed to stay. It began with strange silence. That morning, the birds didn't sing above the shaft. The wind carried a metallic taste, acrid and unnatural. Morning Star noticed it first while hanging linens near the edge of the mess shelter. She saw a thin line of smoke, drifting up from the deepest mouth of the mine. Not like fire, yet heavier. Wrong inside the shaft. Samuel crouched beside a broken pipe, inspecting a pressure valve with two other surveyors. The gauge needle twitched wildly, spinning beyond the red. He barely had time to shout, "Back!" Before the explosion hit, a thunderous roar echoed through the tunnels. Gas burst out in a wave of invisible force, sending men to the ground. Cries rang out, loud, panicked, then were swallowed by a hiss as noxious gas filled the passage. Samuel scrambled to his feet. Two men beside him coughed violently, already collapsing. He grabbed the first by the collar, dragging him toward the shaft's mouth. His vision blurred, his lungs burned, yet he didn't let go. The last thing he saw was the sky turning black at the edges. Morning Star heard the explosion and ran. No one stopped her. The guards were too busy sealing off the entrance. A line of smoke snaked from the shaft like a dying breath. She pushed past a knot of men screaming orders and charged into the blackened fog. "Samuel," she shouted, covering her mouth with her scarf. Samuel, she could barely see. Then movement a body near the edge, limp, face streaked with ash. She fell to her knees beside him. Samuel, he was barely conscious, one arm limp beneath him, his lips turning pale. Round them, the hiss of gas grew louder. They had seconds, maybe less. Without thinking, Morning Star pulled from her satchel the length of hand-woven rope she had braided days ago, meant for gathering firewood. It was coarse, sturdy, knotted at intervals. She wrapped it beneath his arms, looped the ends over her shoulders, and began to drag. Her muscles screamed. The heat and smoke clawed at her skin, yet she gritted her teeth and dug her heels into the gravel. Inch by inch, she pulled him away from the shaft. Another tremor shook the ground, groaned from deep below. Rocks cracked. Part of the tunnel collapsed behind them. She didn't stop. When they broke into open air, the settlement was chaos. Men coughed and pointed. The sheriff ran forward with two others. They tried to take Samuel from her arms. "Get back," she snarled. "He needs air." They laid him on the ground. She knelt beside him, pressing his chest, calling his name again and again. "Come back," she whispered. "You don't get to. Leave me now." His eyelids fluttered. He coughed once, twice, then gasped, pulling in a ragged breath. Morning Star covered her mouth and sobbed. By sunset, the mine was sealed. The company officials declared it inoperable due to gas damage. 3 men died. Several more were wounded. Yet the surveyors survived, pulled out by a girl no one had ever considered more than a servant. Samuel woke in the infirmary, his head wrapped, his ribs bandaged. Morningstar sat beside him, her hair caked with dust, hands blistered and raw. He blinked at her through the haze. "You dragged me?" She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I told you," she whispered. "You don't owe me yet. I couldn't lose you." Samuel reached for her hand, his grip weak yet steady. "You saved me," he said. "No," she said. "We saved each other." A week later, the company offered Samuel a new post far north near fertile plains, where a new railway would be laid safer. Cleaner, a chance to rebuild. He looked out the window at the gutted mine, then at Morningstar. "Will you come with me?" he asked. She didn't answer with words. She only reached for his hand and held it like a promise. 6 months later, the earth was softer. The wind no longer carried the scent of smoke or sulfur. It rolled across the plains like a lullaby, stirring tall grass and sun-warmed air. In the distance, golden stalks swayed in waves, their faces turned toward the sun. The wildflowers had bloomed. Morningstar stood barefoot at the edge of the field, a canvas bag of seeds slung over her shoulder. She wore a linen apron over her dress, a smear of dirt on her cheek. Her hands were already stained from planting. Yet she didn't care. Her feet sunk slightly into the damp earth, grounding her, steadying her. She dropped to her knees and dug a small trench. With careful fingers, she placed the seeds in the dark. Soil one by one, then pressed earth over them, like tucking children into bed. Each motion was deliberate, sacred in its own way. It was the first time in her life she had ever planted something that was hers. Behind her, Samuel repaired the hinges on the small shed they had rebuilt together. His shirt was rolled at the sleeves, collar open, his skin sun-browned from weeks of labor. He worked quietly, methodically, as he always had. Yet now, with a calmness Morningstar had never seen in him back in the mines. There was no heaviness in his shoulders, no smoke in his eyes, only rhythm, only presence. He glanced up when he heard her laugh, a short, surprised burst of joy that rang across the clearing like wind chimes. Morningstar had just noticed the first wildflower she had planted weeks ago had begun to open. Its petals, still curled at the edges, caught the light, like fire. She looked back at him and grinned. Not with politeness, not with fear, yet with wonder. It was the kind of smile only children had, and she had never been allowed to be one. He walked over, knelt beside her in the dirt. "You did that?" he said. "I didn't know it would feel like this." "Like what?" "It's like staying still doesn't mean being trapped." Samuel reached out and brushed a loose strand of hair from her face. "You're not trapped." "I know," she said softer. "I think I'd finally believe it." Their new home was modest, one room, a wood heating device, shelves lined with jars of wild honey and dried beans. Morningstar painted the windowsills yellow. Samuel carved her name into the doorframe just above his. It was the first time either of them had written something down, not to forget yet to honor, by the river bend. She opened a small teaching shed. She taught local women how to cook with root vegetables and herbs, how to make bone broth and corn cakes, how to stitch broken shirts and embroider meaning into every thread. They called her the Wildflower Maiden. Samuel took odd engineering jobs. For local farms, helped dig wells and mend broken bridges. He kept his tools in a small crate beside the bed, organized and oiled, yet only opened it when truly needed. At night, they sat by the fire, no papers signed, no rings exchanged, only the sound of wind in the fields, one breath in peace. One evening, as they watched the sun dip below the horizon, Morningstar rested her head on his shoulder. "You never asked me to stay," she said. Samuel smiled. "You never needed me to. I still don't. I know." She looked up at him, her eyes the color of river stone. "Yet I want to." He kissed her forehead gently, and just like the flowers turning toward light they had never known, they stayed. The light outside the window was golden, soft as a whisper. It spilled across the wooden floorboards of their small home, catching dust motes mid-air like glitter trapped in honey. It warmed the journal that lay open on Samuel's lap, its pages curled slightly at the edges from use, from breath, from time. He sat by the window in the old oak chair Morning Star had found at the trading post. The legs creaked slightly under his weight, yet it had become his place where the wind spoke through the cracks in the pane, where the wildflower curtain fluttered gently like a heartbeat. On the desk beside him, a half-finished mug of tea cooled slowly, the steam rising and curling in the last light of the day. He held a pencil between stained fingers, strong, steady, yet tender now in ways they never used to be. He wrote slowly, the strokes careful, deliberate. Each word was measured, as though he feared breaking the silence with anything untrue. They said you were a girl they could purchase. Yet you were the flame that made ashes bloom again. Who said you'd be anything I required? Yet all I ever required was someone who stayed. He paused and looked out the window. The field beyond was alive, a sea of wildflowers swaying in the breeze, their golden heads bobbing gently as though nodding in agreement. They had started as Morning Star's quiet rebellion, planted one seed at a time in the ashes of a past neither of them wanted. Now they stretched to the horizon. Behind him, footsteps approached soft, sure. Morning Star entered, holding a bowl of roasted squash and sage. She placed it beside him, her movement graceful, practiced. Then she leaned against the window frame, her eyes falling on the open journal. "You are writing again," she said. Samuel nodded, not looking away from the view. "You told me not to let my hands forget how." She smiled, slow and full of something unspoken. "They are," he said, "yet they're not writing about the mines anymore." She moved closer, lowering herself to the floor beside him, resting her head gently against his knee. "I never thought I'd have a place to return to," she said quietly. "A place that waited for me a heating. Device a name on the door. A man who smells like soil and sun." He looked down at her, brushing a calloused thumb across her cheek. "And now," she whispered, "I know. Wherever there is you and flowers and firewood stacked by the door, that is where I bloom. Thank you for journeying with us through the dust, the danger, and the quiet triumph of Samuel and Morning Star. A love story born not from ease, yet from endurance. From a girl they tried to sell to a woman who made a man remember what light felt like. If this story stirred something in you, a memory, a hope, a reminder that love doesn't always arrive loud, yet sometimes in the form of someone who simply stays, then we have more stories to share. Subscribe to Heartstring Chronicles, where every week we bring you tales of devotion, redemption, and the kind of love that grows even from ash. Tap that subscribe button. Ring the bell so you never miss a story. Share this with someone who still believes home is not a place yet, a person. Until next time, stay brave, stay kind, and keep your heart open to stories that stir the soul.